Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Nancy Drew, Season 4, Episode 7. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I like where this episode started because it's like, right, Nick's on his date with Jade, but you can tell he's kind of being reserved. I get it. You've seen how the supernatural is kind of not just messed with your relationship. Everyone's relationship has been touched by the supernatural in some shape or form, especially in this, over the course of this series. But even like their relationships, I mean, because he brings it up later on, it's like, right, his ex, George, was possessed by the ghost of a French lady. That French lady, Odette, right, was the person that Bess was in love with. So it complicated their love situation. Obviously, it's messed up Ace and Nancy's circumstances. And then it's just also like, right, the supernatural have always kind of been in Nick's life, at least for a while. Now, not always been, but you get the point. So, but when it comes time to tell Jade about everything, it's like, oh, what have you been up to lately? Yeah, there's a spider situation. I helped a friend out of it recently. It's like, yeah, cool. Can't get into more specifics than that. Then Ace drops by because he saw Tristan and Nancy dancing, and he also let the ferret go, so it's like that. But then Nancy shows up because she's like, yeah, I think Ace might have saw me. Wait, she sees Ace's boots. It's like, wait, is he here? And it's like, no, I'm not telling you to leave because of Ace. I'm asking you to leave because I'm in a date right now. It's like, well, we got to look for the black door, and this can't wait because the longer we wait, the longer that monster's out there. The monster's obviously connected to like all these secrets being hidden and these memories being wiped and all of this, so on and so forth. We just don't know why. Is it a monster doing it on its own? Is it doing someone else's bidding? We know that Abbott and Bree's dad were connected to this black door, so we need to figure out about that. Only person that can potentially give us an answer is Bree's dad, but he's dead. So, completely and utterly screws up Nick's date situation. I love it's like Nickerson. It's like they did it to him like twice in the episode. He's like, it's not going to work on me again, and it super did. So, at the same time, they're dealing with that. You have Nick figuring out his love life. Bess is having to deal with like the legal situation of breaking and entering the historical society last episode. So now her and Carson and George are working on the defense, which we'll save that side of things for later. But that's what Bess and George are kind of juggling, while Nick is juggling his circumstances, while Ace and Nancy are juggling theirs, still the aftermath and the continued complications of it. So, there ended up being one thing that belonged to Bree's dad that could be found for this seance, which I even love them being like, man, we've come a long way since our first seance. It's like, getting a little nostalgic because it's like, it has been so long. It's like, you were such fledglings at one point in time, and now it's just like, once again, the supernatural is just kind of like, yeah, this is how it rolls. Like, this is an everyday occurrence to us. It's our lives, and we just kind of accept it as is. But they get drawn into a game, which obviously gives me very like Jumanji vibes, because obviously it's like, it has a very like 80s aesthetic to it, because I'm sure it's kind of it's not quite that, but obviously when you think like 80s, you think like Dungeons and Dragons. But like I said, because the way the game kind of came to life, it immediately made me think of Jumanji, original Jumanji, not the rebooted like sequels. That's like, you go into the game, it's like, and the game comes to you. I mean, to be fair, Robin Williams' character was in the game that entire time, but still. I do love how like they also play into some like cliche like 80isms in this episode, because it's just kind of like they end up saying some phrases and stuff. And I even love at one point Bess was reading the manual. She's like, "Mwah ha 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 ha." She's like, no, it literally says that. Basically was like, yeah, the 80s were kind of extra. They kind of went like, they went really far. But then like they're going up against the Soul Collectors, and then their minions, the Shades, and that ends up being a whole hullabaloo. And like just them having to kind of actually play the game. I think it's actually really dope that the board moves itself and stuff like that. So, and once again, everyone wanted to kind of bail out because they were on a time restraint, because it's like, well, Nick wants to make things right with Jade, especially because she gave him more time. It's like, all right, I'm gonna come by tonight, but then Bess needs to go to the precinct, because it's like, yo, I need to be there to, with Carson as he presents my case to Sheriff Chief Lovett. So, but it was kind of a smart move on their part, where it's like, all right, we'll kind of prolong the game as long as possible. Obviously, there's a time limit in between turns. It's like, as we learned from Nick, if you don't do it, you get wrapped up in these ropey vines that will squish you to death. So, but as long as they wait for Bess, because I love the whole point about, well, why don't we just take the game to this town? It's like, nope. Having a massive supernatural game, like, who knows what complications that'll bring up, especially because the shades, you can't see the shades or the soul collectors, unless, at least at the time, it only seemed like you could only see because everyone could see the soul collectors, at least who's participating in the game, but only the person whose turn it is can see the shades, and you have to solve a riddle to beat them, which it typically, from what we saw, mainly involved ripping off body parts, because truth be told, Nancy didn't do it because she accidentally weakened him with silver, but it seems like she would have needed to take his tongue. One, like, Ace had to take that dude's hair. It's interesting that it was all body parts, because even Bess says she had to go for the guy's eye, she just never got a chance to. Nick had to go for the guy's foot, and George had to go for the guy's finger, which is like, that's pretty morbid, but it's interesting that it was the riddles all revolved around body parts. You know, I was wondering what else this kind of gave me vibes of besides like just Tsunami. I basically said Jumanji and Tsunami at the same time. Other than Jumanji, it reminded me of Goosebumps. Now I'm sitting here thinking about it, just like the creepy aesthetic. It's like, it was just like legitimately a fun episode, and just like it's. But yeah, Bess. I love that it kind of lent validity to Bess's like performance of, yeah, she's getting strangled. She's like, oh yes, agony. My friend Nancy was in so much agony, so that's why I had to break in to help out. You know, it's like, oh, she was in so much pain, and it was an immediate situation, so I had to break into the historical society to get some stuff that could treat the wound. And it's like, yeah, that fits. Once again, her performance of her being strangled by the rope that no one else in the room can see except for her, and it plays into her performance. And luckily, Nick and them got to her beforehand. But I also love that, like, while they're dealing with that, like, the next shade pops up, and he starts shooting bow and arrow. He shot a crossbow at her, and she dodged the first two, and then got hit by the third one. I was like, what does that mean? And it's like she got sent to, I guess, the graveyard, because she had a giant G on her head, so they had to put shades on her to make it kind of go, doing a little bit of a Weekends at Bernie's, because she's not dead, but she is kind of almost in like a supernatural coma, so they had to cover for that. Then they end up finding out, okay, these things are weak to silver, so how do we... Okay, that's what Ace looked up, and then Nancy thought about, well, how did I beat the first shade? There was a silver candlestick that ended up hitting him and weakening him, so I could easily take him down without even having to solve the riddle. So they armed themselves up, and I love that they try to cheat the system, because they're like, right, why don't we just go straight to the graveyard? We'll be safe. And they all Ace, Nancy, and George go for the cheat, and now Nick is the only one left. He's like, we've never been safe in a graveyard. It's like, yeah. And so it's up to Nick now. It's like they're visible to everyone, because we see that later on with Jade. So if they were out and about in town, that I don't know if that would have helped or hurt everything with Bess, because that was also Bess's thing of like, especially because I'm being criticized because of Historical Society and all the supernatural stuff, drawing any supernatural stuff that first and foremost you'd be the only one to see. They'd blame you for the occult, just kind of like how, like, as we saw in Stranger Things, the demonizing and the satanic element of Dungeons and Dragons to the public's eye and stuff like that. So. But I love that they made Nick go full, like, 80s action hero, especially when he got blown behind the bar, and he came up with his shirt ripped for absolutely no reason, but it's like, shirt's ripped, and he's bleeding a little bit. You know, I was about to say, like, I guess it'd be even more 80ish if he just, like, ripped it completely, but I'm like, nah, fighting in a rip. Either way, I was just like, I love how cheesy it is and awesome it is. Because even at one point in time, he had to stop himself when he heard himself kind of say, like, an 80s catchphrase. He was almost like, ugh. Jade was there. It's like, okay, Jay, they want kind of like, wait, what's going on with you? Okay, this is all crazy. He's like, I kind of need you to stay here. Okay, so the supernatural is real. I'm kind of part of it. And he started listing how the supernatural's affected his life, and he just didn't want it to ruin his relationship. I mean, his last relationship had a supernatural hang up on it, that being George possessed by Odette's. It was Odette, right? I'm trying to think. I was like, it wasn't like Odessa. I think it was Odette. I think the French ghost she was in love with. Either way, when that's all said and done, he saved the day, and just standing at the door, knife in hand, and had kicked the he had taken the orb from the last remaining soul catcher and kicked him through the door. And it's like, what was the catchphrase? He's like, "Don't let the door hit you on the way out," or something. Or let the door hit you on the way out. He said something like that. I'm probably screwing it up completely, but I was just like, yeah, I love how cheesy and amazing that is. So it's like, yeah, we kind of missed out on your 80s action hero moment. You know, I mean, granted, we got to see the aftermath of it, but still. So, but they ended up trying to, I think Bree's dad's name is Ron. They were trying to get in contact with his soul. They ended up releasing all the souls, and it's like, right, we missed our chance because the moon's not in the same alignment it's supposed to be. We'd have to wait an entire month to try it again. And it's like, yeah, this was all for nothing. It's like, not really. We did save the day. I might have screwed up my relationship, but at the end of the day, we saved a whole bunch of trapped souls, so that wasn't nothing. But to be fair, Nick and Jade are in a good place because Jade, it's like, no, like, I saw you in your element, and now you're being open with me. Like, it's kind of, yes, a wild situation you're mixed up in, but at the very least, I know all there is to know about you. Now, part of me is wondering and worried. Like, once again, you're always suspicious of people, because you're like, are we going to find out that is Jay just going to be like, hey, they are a normal person? Just like, hey, as in they have no ties to the supernatural, or we're going to find out you have something to, I don't know. Like, cause it's a thing of like too many people popping up around the same time. Like I said, Tristan and stuff like that. I'm like, I don't like, my theory previously was, could it be that he's the monster? Like he transforms into that and either he's not aware of it, a la kind of like some Teen Wolf type of situation where some of those transformations happen in Teen Wolf without really getting to it. I forgot what it was called. The thing from season 2, who it really was. They weren't aware of what they had become. Like I was wondering, if it was kind of something like that. Maybe Tristan's completely unaware and maybe he's being manipulated by his parents, or maybe his parents are selling him out to someone else to utilize in that manner. Maybe they're a part of it, maybe they're not, because I'm starting to wonder the group that's coming after Bess. I'm curious if they actually control everything. Like they control the monster because it's their secrets that are coming up. But because it's like, why would this happen now? Like these stolen memories and stuff like that. Like, why is that coming to a head now? Could it be that someone's got some hidden secrets they don't remember anymore and they need the monster released so they can? Like, why would you try and spill this town's secrets? I mean, we've only come across 2 major secrets, that being Abbott and Bree, but we don't know anyone. Well, plus the guy that's tied into Abbott, and so I mean, I'll lump all the Abbott stuff as one situation, even though that involved 3 different people. I just don't know what that fully like. Cause once again, we haven't fully seen it affect the rest of the town. To be fair, they've kind of dealt with the water situation, but even then, we never even heard any stories of anyone being infected with it. So you would think with the town, someone would have had drunk the water, but once again, maybe it only affects those with, well, no, because it affected Nancy. I mean, I guess with everything she was going through, it affected her that way, but we hadn't got any reports about anyone acting differently upon the water, so why that hadn't really affected anyone else. Maybe the argument is Nancy and them kind of got affected because it's like, right, they're tied to the supernatural world, that they do have their own secrets, but it didn't correlate with Nancy's circumstances with kind of like them keeping secrets about the supernatural. So that's why I'm like, maybe that's just kind of one of those things that like, you kind of don't overthink it. It just is what it is. It's just not enough time to really cover any other incidents that have happened around town without them knowing about it. Because I would have thought there have been reports about people acting differently. Like, it doesn't just naturally go away out of your system. You act, well, to be fair, they don't have the means to, like, remove it from anyone else because the machine broke after the last rodeo with it, so. On the horror movie set. Oh, yeah, because I completely forgot. I let that slip my mind. I was like, all right, because that ties into the whole Bree situation. Either way, tangents and all that aside. Now that I'm thinking about that, that really leans into like the 80s of it, because that's very like Candyman-ish. I mean, that's 80s, more so like 90s. I'm trying to remember. I'm assuming that Candyman came out in the 90s, so I'm sure that's probably more of that. Because I'm sure that falls in the same category as like, an urban legend, I Know What You Did Last Summer. I mean, obviously the Candyman leans more in the supernatural of it all, but because I don't remember if that horror movie's supposed to be like a supernatural thing or not. Because if it's not, well, I mean, it had supernatural elements to it, but it's just because of the hook and everything. I'm trying to remember. I don't think the urban legend situation I think it was a knife. Same thing for. Did I Know What You Did Last Summer have a hook? I know Candyman had a hook. I don't remember if I Know What You Did Last Summer had a hook or not. I never saw the Prime Video TV show, and I've not seen either movie, because I know there was at least one sequel, wasn't there? I Know What You Did Last Summer 2, I believe it was called, just like TOO, and like as in also. I don't God, it's been so long. I know I vaguely remember the first one, but I feel like there definitely was a sequel. Wasn't Brandy in one of those? I'm going on a massive tangent. I do apologize. But it was just like, because I just feel like they're kind of going for a style and aesthetic this season, and I never really thought about that. I don't think I commented on it at the time, but with like this like 80s thing they kind of got going on, like I said, this like very Jumanji aesthetic they got going on, but kind of almost like this 80s feeling vibe they got going on with this particular episode in conjunction with the horror movie, which kind of had like a maybe early 2000s, maybe like mid to late 90s feel to it. It feels like they're kind of playing for all these decades and feels and aesthetics with some of the episodes and stuff. And probably if I go back and really pay attention, especially this season, maybe I'd catch a little bit more of that. But now this is just me thinking in retrospect. The whole point was I just don't know who to trust, and so I'm worried. Like, okay, what if Jay ends up being connected? I think that's highly unlikely. I'm still going to keep it in the back of my mind, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Like I said, with the Tristan thing, I threw it out there as a possibility. I'm still not certain on it, but it's still a possibility I'm keeping open in my head. But this episode made me feel like it's probably the people after Bess in Historical Society. Like maybe the reason why they're gunning for her so badly is because they're doing a supernatural thing and they don't want anyone getting in their way, because the Historical Society has always had its ties to the supernatural. But once again, this thing's doing what it's doing, and so why now? Because Nancy had suggested, like, right, this whole, like, these people always died, like, 27 years apart from, like, each of the different victims. And it's like, now it's around the same time for a new victim to kind of be chosen, like someone that kind of died before being 30 and stuff like that. Part of, like, this continued thing, like, why that's the thing, because now it's like, oh, is that why the memory sealing / unsealing goop from the monster that was in the water, it all came from the bodies. So, which came first? Like, did that thing kill all of them and implant some of its like goo in them? Did it have to digest in these bodies for a while before it can be utilized in the capacity? Like, it needs to be stored for a certain amount of time and for a certain amount of bodies. So it needed to be like for a long period of time, plus these 8 bodies. Not unless it's, I was like about to say, not unless it's a situation where these bodies come up every like 27 years, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. So maybe it only happened now because all 8 pieces that were necessary, all 8 bodies, were able to rise. So maybe you always needed 8. A lot of conjecture on my part. They did find out, though, that Ron pointed out to Nancy where the black door is, and it turns out it's at Town Hall. So kind of filling out the other storylines, the whole George and Carson of it all. You could tell it kind of hurt George when Carson like saw like her board about like all the ideas and he erased it, but then he realizes later on how much that hurt her, and he's like, I'm sorry, I don't talk about it, but I'm dyslexic. And she's like, wait, what? He's like, yeah. And the fact is, when I saw, like, it was a lot for me to kind of handle, so I needed to write things in a certain way that I can process it. And he's like, but that was me being inconsiderate to you. I was like, that's actually really dope of you, Carson. And later, him and George had this really nice conversation where she's like, I think I have ADHD. Because it's like, for me, she's always reveled in the chaos, but it's like, maybe that's not, that's how she's always juggled things. That's how her mind works. Because that's something she's really had to shift this season, because she's always reveled in the chaos. That's where she's always worked, because maybe that just is legitimately how her mind works. And it's just because there's kind of order in that disorder. And she was going to get examined when she had a teacher wonder like, oh, do you have ADHD? And wanted her to get examined. But like our aunt was like, nah, don't listen to that. And so she just never did, because she thought like, oh, admitting you have a condition like that, she saw it as kind of like a weakness and a bad thing. But, but then like Carson, like having his, being dyslexic and embracing it, it's like everyone has their thing, and finding a way to kind of utilize it, to work on it. It kind of inspired George that, so I just thought that was kind of a neat thing. And I do like that it has brought George and Carson closer in that capacity. I like that Ryan, helping out with the whole situation with Bess, decided to investigate Lovitz, but wasn't able to find too much before she found out, like, oh, I heard you're digging into me. So there was a car accident from like 2009 But it's like, yeah, it was involved a cat, and I love Ryan being like, yeah, it was nothing, it was just a cat. Yeah, but there was a long leave of absence you took in 2016, and Lovitz definitely got quiet then. It's like, cool, so let Bess back into Historical Society. It's like, well, some people aren't going to be too happy about that. And Ryan's like, yeah, but I mean, don't we all piss people off from time to time? Who hasn't made someone mad, an enemy? But it's like, yeah, what was she... why was she out of that long period of time in 2016? Because that's the thing. You now know the supernatural exists, so why are you joining up? Like, you have to... Because she's like, oh yeah, that society, that group that's coming after Bess, I have nothing to do with them. Because Ron was wondering, like, are you in their pocket or something? Because they were actually wondering, like, does she have something part to play in it? Because even when it was all said and done, like, Carson was able to present stuff, but Lovett was still kind of like, no, we're going to still formally charge her. And it's like, but why? Because it feels vindictive at that point in time. It's like, yeah, she definitely has like some ulterior motives, or at the very least, she's being pushed by someone else's ulterior motives. And I would have felt like who out of anyone would benefit from it has to be the glasses. So maybe this has nothing to do with the group that's coming after Bess, but it feels too coincidental. Like the glasses have their beef with Bess and Ryan. So it feels like them utilizing Lovitz as well as this group seems like that could be, like I said, whether those end up being separate things, it feels like it's all going to ultimately end up connecting with the overarching story, but I just don't know if it will. So we'll have to wait and see. But Ryan and Bess came back to the society, found like, what was it, kind of blood or whatever, and then the horseshoes in it. It's meant to be a sign. And she's like, all right, come on, you like anti-supernatural prudes, like let's go. And then you want to do this, we can do this. So you want to try and threaten me, I got you. There's also, and this kind of ties into the last thing I want to cover, is the whole Ace and Nancy of it all. George and Ace did have this conversation where George had asked, like, oh, how do you... Ace had asked, like, right, do you ever get weird or feel weird about Nick bringing up Jade? And George was like, I mean, it just took some time. It's like, but I have something else to focus on now. It's cool. Like, what about you? And Ace is like, the dead bodies at the morgue. And George is like, cool. He's like, yeah, that's fine. You know, it's like, right, not the most lively, you know, positive thing to kind of like focus all your mind, your attention to. Also, Nancy found out about the whole... It is a ferret, right? I was calling it a ferret earlier. I think it's a ferret, right? I forgot its name, but she had, like, because the Band-Aid he had kind of fell off and he was putting it back on, but she was doing enough research into him. She's like, I recognize that bite mark. You got bit. You captured it, didn't you? Because I spent all this time looking for it. It's like, oh, and then you let it go. So it's like, that ended up being a whole issue. And now they kind of had to come face to face at the end of the episode about it. It's like, right, you broke my heart, and now I can't really move on. Like, because it's like, what do you want? You want us to go backwards, but can we even do that? And that was something that I think Nick had talked to Ace about. Like, can you really go back to just being friends? Because it wasn't always just a friendship with Ace. He's always liked Nancy since high school. You know, once again, she was a sophomore, he was a senior, but it's all like there wasn't like that friendship was kind of based on like him, like her not knowing how you really felt, and you felt a certain way about her for a while now. It just finally grew into something much more, but it's like you can't really go back now that genie's been taken out of the bottle. There's no putting it back. And so at the end of the day, it's like, right, we owe it to each other to just let each other be happy. So without kind of having to walk on eggshells around each other and being complicated, because it's like, right, I wanted to keep going, you didn't, and then you ended up breaking my heart. Regardless of your reasons for doing it, you still walked away breaking my heart. So Ace is like, fine, I'll give you your space. So I guess maybe even when it comes to this case stuff, they'll probably have someone be the intermediary, like where Ace is probably like, I won't show up, but I'll let Nick or Bess or George know, and they'll pass on like any information. So, because like that's the only time they're really around each other now is in like mystery solving capacities. It's the Drew crew. Once again, I'm going to call them that now because once again, 4 seasons and it never crossed my mind that was their name. Because I should have known, because it's like, yeah, it's kind of like the Scooby game, which now they're not even really the Scooby game, they're the mystery. Maybe they've always been like the mystery game, but I was about to say Mystery Inc., but it's like, well, because of the show Mystery Inc., but that was also a group before them that they kind of inherited, and then it's a whole thing, right? So, I don't know, it's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us. Going forward into the next episode. It's still that wild thing of, man, just every episode that passes by, we're like getting further and further in. It's coming to an end. I was actually doing the math. I think this has 6 episodes left because I was wondering because Riverdale is obviously on the same night and it's coming to an end. So they'll both end on, they'll both have the series finales on the same night because it has 6 episodes left, just like Nancy Drew does. I mean, that depends on if there's any more breaks for the next 6 episodes for either show. I mean, they might take a break on the same night, or maybe this will take one and Riverdale won't, but they are kind of even right now, so they probably will both end on the same night, so that's just kind of interesting. So, but it's wild to see that both of them are so close to their ends right now. So either way, I'm very, very excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.